Hello and welcome to the 18th episode of your Bamboo Chalupa digital marketing podcast. My name is Brett Snyder. I'm the president of Knucklepuck, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nate Shiver, the author of shiverweb.com.
Howdy, howdy.
So the topic for today's post, or today's episode rather, is mobile and the future of search engine optimization. On April 21st, Google rolled out what was a pre-announced algorithm update, that reflected a pretty major change to the way that they process results on mobile devices. This allegedly was going to affect 40% of Fortune 500 websites, based on TechCrunch research, which we'll link to in the show notes, and also other research showing that it's going to affect maybe even more than 40% of, non-Fortune 500 websites. So this is an update that is targeted on a number of different sites. It's not industry specific, it's not vertical specific, not e-commerce versus B2B. This is an update that Google is making to be able to improve the quality of the results on mobile devices. That's it. At its very core level, that's what Google's trying to accomplish here. But really, this update isn't necessarily news, because there was this formal announcement is just really validating what everybody has already known, and that's mobile traffic is where the growth opportunity is for the web looking toward the future.
Oh, yeah. And you have to keep in mind the two primary goals for Google is to have actually more mobile-friendly results in the search results. More app content, more pages that are going to rank and give mobile users the answers and the experience that they want. That oftentimes is a very different intent and a very different expectation than someone that is browsing on their laptop or desktop. And, Google, they want relevant results still. Relevant results are still going to show up, but they want results where the text is readable, that, you don't have to tap or zoom, and you don't have to find, that tiny little button that's tinier than anyone's thumb is. And, pages that don't have that awkward, unplayable content or giant pop-ups or require horizontal scrolling and just all the things that are a nuisance on desktops, but on mobile are really a experience killer.
Right. And what's really kind of interesting about this is that this is not necessarily a change in terms of affecting the quality of the content that Google ranks in their results. This is a change that is very directly focused on a user's experience with that content. And we're going to go into this a little bit more, later in this episode. But Google does call out the fact that they still want the most relevant, the most high quality content to exist in their search results. But what's important to understand about this particular update is that it's very, very largely focused on the user experience behind these results. As Nate mentioned, can people read the text? Can they click on these buttons? Are they able to engage with the site in the way that the site was intended to be engaged with? Now, most people focus only on that desktop experience, but now that people are, increasingly moving towards, a mobile lifestyle where people are doing a lot of their searches on mobile devices, Google wants to make sure that there's that consistent experience on those devices. And a couple of other notes to be aware of here. This update only impacts rankings on mobile. This does not impact rankings on tablet devices. So there is a clear distinction there, and it's actually been interesting. You can ask a number of people, where is your iPad considered a mobile device? I actually did a kind of a straw poll on this a couple of months ago. And it was about 50-50 in terms of people who consider the tablet a mobile device. But as far as Google is concerned, this is only focused on your mobile, your smartphone traffic, and not on tablets. This also only applies to individual pages, not entire websites. So as we looked at something like a Panda update that was more of a holistic algorithm, update to affect low-quality content as a whole, holistically on the website, this mobile update only applies to individual pages, so it allows you to rank higher for individual pages that are deemed to be mobile friendly, but it's not something that will have a more sweeping impact on the rest of your domain.
Yeah, and Brett, I think it's interesting that both me and you have been referring to this as an update, which is also what Google refers to it as, whereas the media has been referring to it as a penalty. And
they've been referring to it as mobile-geddon. We got extreme in terms of the way that people want to address this update.
I know, it's gotten really ridiculous. And what's gotten lost in all the noise is the fact that this was a pre-announced update from Google. It's something that they really don't do. I mean, when they rolled out Panda, Penguin, a lot of their other things. It's things, or even Hummingbird. I remember that they rolled out Hummingbird, and it wasn't until a month after when the SEO industry, kind of found out that, oh, they had done something. But this is something that Google pre-announced, and I think that's a really key distinction versus some of their other penalties that were specifically designed to, remove thin sites in the case of Panda, or remove sites that are just spamming the internet with bad links in the case of Penguin. That this is an update that's supposed to improve rankings for pages that should rank well on mobile because they're designed to be mobile first.
And what's interesting here to kind of think about that is all those other updates that we look at as penalties, if you think about it, those were closing loopholes that were manipulating the search results. Panda was designed to address low-quality sites that were compromising the quality of the results. Penguin was designed to remove low-quality sites with spammy backlink profiles that were manipulating artificially the results in Google. This update is not about closing loopholes. This update is about encouraging people to recognize that a mobile experience needs to be a distinct and independent experience, and that if you're not providing that optimal experience on this particular device, then the quality of the results are inherently compromised. And so it's not a matter of closing loopholes to try to find people who are spamming the results. It's more about trying to encourage people to align specifically with the way that, user behavior has evolved.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why they pre-announced it, was because they didn't want to weed out bad results or tweak things in their algorithm behind the scenes. They wanted they wanted everyone online to change their behavior. They wanted web designers to change their standards. And by announcing this big mobile update, it was a way to get in the news and to trigger the herd, so to speak, or doing an action that will basically change the behavior of a large number of people. This is something that they've done in the past, say with the announcement about guest blog posts, where a lot of people question, well, how much power does Google have? A lot of the power that Google has is wound up in the idea of, the bully pulpit, where everyone pays attention to Google. And when they announce something like this, everyone pays attention. And so this is a way for Google to use that power of sort of guiding the herd to move web designers and everyone in the direction that the web is going, which is in the direction of mobile.
And you think about that, where it's kind of a good thing. I'm usually one who's a bit skeptical in terms of, just kind of blindly following what Google tells you to do. But the web is becoming increasingly mobile. And websites and businesses, have been slow to adopt this change. That they just, mobile responsive was even something that, was huge a couple of years ago. And everyone's like, you have to have a responsive site. This is fantastic. But a lot of people still don't. They don't even have that site that will just update the format in terms of what device you're looking on. And Google wants you to really consider there are multiple, mobile-friendly formats that are beyond just responsive. They want you to have an opportunity to present your users as a website or a business owner, to present your users with an experience that is uniquely tailored to that mobile device. And in doing so, it really makes sure that we can focus in on those same best practices, that we want to say that, yes, we're still retaining that same quality and relevancy factors. You can still rank in Google, even in mobile searches, if your content isn't optimized for mobile, but it's providing a suboptimal experience. And that's what Google wants to address. That's what this update is designed to address, is to encourage people to not settle for a suboptimal experience for your users, is to make sure that you have, as we mentioned before, that uniquely tailored format that is designed specifically for these mobile devices.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons Google pre-announced it was because, in a way, there has always been a mobile penalty. You think about behaviors that we know that Google measures, like pogo sticking, where, if a user lands on a search result, they click it, they go to that result, and it provides a suboptimal experience, and then they return to the same search results. Google knows that the user didn't have a good experience on that website, and they factor that in.
It's almost like bounce rate for your search results.
Exactly.
Instead of bounce rate, when you traditionally think of it, is I get to a web page on a site and I see only that page and leave. This is almost like reverse bounce rate for the search results. I'm on the search results, I click on a link, and I'm already back there 5 seconds later.
Oh yeah,
It means that this was not a good experience.
Yeah, and that's been there. And this the same way with, if you think about implicit queries, where if you are doing a search for hotels on your desktop at home, Google is going to factor in those devices in your location into the type of search results that they serve. Compared to if you're on your phone at an airport, you're going to get different search results. And even though that may not be a direct mobile penalty or mobile update, that's something that has been in place just as a way of encouraging, well, not even encouraging, but just giving users what they want.
Yeah, the change that has existed has been entirely focused on Google improving their product for their users. This change, this algorithm update, and the reason, again, why it was pre-announced is to get businesses and website owners to be able to understand that Google is, at this point, supremely confident that having a mobile experience that is slightly different than your desktop experience improves the quality of those results. And so they are telling you, we are going to start putting more weight and more emphasis on these factors because we know that that has a very positive return in terms of how people engage with the product being the search results. So when we talk about the old mobile quote unquote penalties or ways that you can have a different experience or to improve was focused only on Google's results. This pre-announced change is still focused on Google's results, but it's trying to get the business and the website owners to be able to understand we don't want to screw you with this. This is not designed to screw anybody over, but it's designed to tell you in as formal and concrete terms as we can that this is something that needs to be embraced for the web to move forward.
All right, so that's the background, but let's talk about why mobile has mattered and why it will continue to matter and what that means for marketing SEO.
If you think about it, and if you think about the way that Google markets all of their products, this is your Android phone, your Chrome, your email through Gmail, whether it's talking about a one consistent login for all of Google's properties across your mail, your calendar, YouTube, Google Plus, trying to push a consistent network there, tying everything back to your local results. Google wants to give you a consistent experience across all of their products. We're focusing only on Google right now because this update is specific to Google, but Microsoft's doing the same thing. Microsoft's tagline now is, they want to have one device for everything in your life. And the idea here is that search and web search, internet searching is so ingrained in our everyday lives that these products need to adapt to changes in the user experience. And having that consistent experience across all the products, a consistently strong experience, doesn't necessarily mean you have the same sites or the same content ranking. It just essentially means that we need to have much more deliberate quality assurance from Google's perspective to be able to have that consistent experience across all of these different products or devices that Google is so intimately involved in your day-to-day life.
Oh yeah, and in a way, that just draws out the distinction and the reasoning behind why mobile and desktop, they're very, very distinct applications of the same product. In both products, or in search, you're looking for things, but the way you look for things on mobile and the way you look for things on desktop are going to be very, very different application, whether it comes to apps or whether it comes to, those implicit queries. But either way, mobile is where the growth is, and mobile is what drives design because it's sort of the lowest common denominator of what you need on a website. A lot of times design that works on mobile translates very well to desktop, but usually it doesn't work that way in reverse. And that's something to keep in mind because the other trend that's also growing is that more people's sole access to the internet, especially when you talk about, the next 3 billion or 4 billion people that are coming online in the next 20 years. A lot of times their sole access to the internet is going to be through their mobile device.
And then also, you get down to the types of queries people are making. Maybe it's not your everyday traditional, professional work where you're sitting in front of a computer, but it's things that are a little bit more, social content. We talk a lot about social media, but think about social content, things like on BuzzStream, things that really aren't something you need to perform your job, but things that you enjoy as just a person that's able to kind of absorb different types of content, reading the news, reading, up on sports, being able to stay on top of cultural trends or, television shows, movies. There are different ways that people consume content online now. And to Nate's point, many people solely access content on the internet, especially people who maybe aren't using it so specifically for their professional lives. And you think about how much Google search is involved in our personal lives and our personal decisions. Everything from trying to find different restaurants that you want to go eat at, being able to look up, and everybody's been in that argument where you're at the bar and you're arguing over when Whoop There It Is was released, and you can go and you can look that information up. Google search and internet searching is something that has just become so inherent to the way that we live. And it's something that we expect to be able to find information at our fingertips, which is, we've used that phrase in the past to talk about, the computers, the internet in general. But now it's even so much more direct, where you have access to that information wherever you are, whenever you are, for whatever query you could possibly need information on. And so I want to go back to what Nate had talked about before with kind of this different applications in the same product. And when you think about it, the goal is always to serve that end user. You've heard us repeat that a few times already. But if somebody's searching on mobile versus a desktop device, they have slightly different needs. They might be the same person, but they're not necessarily the same user. And it's definitely not the same user experience across these different devices. And this update is designed for Google to adapt to those distinctions.
I like that. And when we take this, two different applications of the same product, and we start looking at marketing SEO, I think the number one thing that we're going to have to keep in mind with SEO is that it's going to be even more winner take all than it has been in the past. And when I say that, it's that, SEO has always been thought of as, how do we get on the front page, or how do we get in the first 10 links? And on desktop, there was room for the, quote unquote losers, or the people who were on the second page, or the people who weren't number one, because, on the desktop, it's pretty easy to go to page 2, or to change your search results to, show 20, show 100 and scroll. But on mobile, the SERP real estate is at an even higher premium because it's simply smaller. And so ranking number 1, number 2 has an even bigger premium, bigger payoff for providing the right user experience to people on mobile.
No, absolutely. And I think it's interesting to think about, what best practices actually translate through this update. It's not a complete redefinition of how the search results are monitored. Things like our traditional best practices almost just matter a little bit more. You think about the infrastructure and the on-page, build of your website. Page speed is absolutely essential. When people are on mobile devices, that's what mobile friendly means. It means more than just the way that the content's presented, but how is the mobile device able to actually access this content and present it to the user? You talk about the idea of design. Nate even talked about how, this Google update is trying to push people and trying to trigger the herd in terms of how experiences are designed for mobile devices. Looking at the idea that now Google, if anybody has kind of noticed this subtle change, they're no longer using URLs in the search results on mobile. You don't see, if you go and search for something, that it's www.example.com/page. You're actually now using the brand name or the website name and the breadcrumbs essentially as the URL in mobile results. It's actually an entirely new markup language that we'll link over to in the site or in the show notes here, but talking about the new kind of structured markup that can be used to present the appropriate brand perception on a mobile device. These ideas of, it's not a complete change. Structuring your data is not something that's new. It's just providing you a new tool to be able to do that specific to a mobile device. When we look at these things, like we talked about infrastructure, design, UX, the content format and the presentation, you don't want people to have to dig down into all of this. All of these different aspects that are very complementary to what we're already doing on our desktop device. We just need to have a uniquely specific strategy for incorporating all of these best practices to a slightly different experience on a mobile device.
Oh yeah, and you talk about how things that we already do for desktop matter even more. I specifically think about, being able to do deep analysis on why things aren't working and what things are working. Because I think on mobile, if you have a sticking point to a checkout or a sticking point on a contact form on mobile, that's going to kill off that conversion. Whereas someone on a desktop might have worked around it. Just the other day, I was on an e-commerce website that they had applied share buttons, and the share buttons were literally blocking the buy now button. And I ended up abandoning cart just because of that one element was out of place and sort of killed the experience.
And think about that. That's not even a ranking signal here. That's UX. Indicative as to the motivation behind this change.
Again, Google is sort of using the power that they have to move design thinking and to move website owner thinking towards thinking mobile first and thinking about how mobile users are experiencing their website. And so, on desktop, you might could track down, abandoned cart report and try to dig in. But unless you're also doing testing on mobile, you might not see that one little element that's killing off all your conversions.
And I think let's talk a little bit more about some immediate actions, some tactical things that we can now do to make sure that we are prepared for, as we mentioned, the ongoing application of this mobile update. This is not something that just happened and is done. This is something that is a real-time update that's rolling out in real time. That's something where Google has, has mentioned that every time they recrawl your site, they're performing these same checks to make sure that you're mobile friendly. So what can we do to make sure that we are aligning our sites with what Google's looking for?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is to actually look at your mobile report in Google Analytics and find out how much your website is impacted by this mobile update.
Or by mobile search in general. You can look at this point, all we have is kind of historical data, but you see how much traffic is actually being driven by mobile.
Yeah, because you might still be in the industry where the vast majority of your traffic is still people on desktop. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't start thinking mobile first, but it will allow you to prioritize your own efforts and see where the biggest wins for SEO are going to be. It might show you that an overwhelming majority of people are coming in through mobile and you should drop everything and that should be the first thing you should look at. But I think what matters is to look at your own mobile report in Google Analytics.
Right, and look at how that's trended over time as well.
Right.
Where if you start to say, hey, we started to see an uptick in mobile traffic. If you look back at traffic in 2009, 2010, you're not going to see a lot of mobile traffic just because that's not the way that people experienced the internet and experienced Google. At least not, that was still more in the early adopters phase. Now we're at the point where Google search on mobile is not considered to be a value add at all. It's a basic expectation. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at how that actually impacts the way your users find your site. You also, and Nate and I talk about this, I think in every single episode so far, where one of our recommendations is to make sure that you're testing. Testing is very, very easy. Think about how it feels to navigate through the site on your phone and tablet. Conduct user testing. Make sure that if you are selling products that you're not putting your Google Plus share link in front of the buy now button. These are just the very basic things that are essential to running a website. You just need to apply that same thinking that you're traditionally kind of conditioned to look at desktop only. You need to apply that same thinking down to your mobile device.
Yeah, and don't just look at the homepage to see if it looks good. I mean, navigate to your site via organic search to a deep landing page and just see how it presents itself and how it works.
Resize your content. Click on your different navigation buttons or your menu drop downs. Turn your phone from horizontal to vertical. See how the site actually engages. And this is one of the things where these aren't in-depth, statistical analyses of A/B testing. This is just at the very beginning. You can do that right now. You can do that while you listen. Go in there and kind of look at your site on a mobile device and see how you can navigate through that. And then beyond that, use the tools that Google provides to be able to say whether or not they deem the page to be mobile friendly. We'll link over to the Webmaster Tools, link in the show notes that shows you whether or not Google deems your site to be mobile friendly. But it also lets you know that, hey, you might be restricting certain resources. There might be some small technical changes that you can make that don't really involve re-architecting the entire site, but just allowing Google access from a mobile perspective to be able to crawl and index the site.
And again, Google wants people to move in the direction of mobile. And so, they have really specific technical guides for a wide range of CMSs. Google Developers Blog, they have a resource for WordPress. They have resources for a lot of CMSs so that it's not a guessing game. They want people to move in the right direction and they have answers out there.
Remember, this is not a penalty. This is not designed to hurt people who are trying to take advantage of their site, of Google. This is trying to give people the tools to be able to provide a better resource.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that there is a Google bot for smartphones that's actually been around for quite a while. It's been around since January 2014.
It's been around for at least a year.
Yeah, and it's been crawling around the web, and it's something that you can check to see if the Google bot for smartphones can access your site and download all the resources that it wants to download. You can do things like build your content around intent and not around pure keyword stuffing. This goes back to the idea that mobile users often have implicit information built around their query. They might, for example, for restaurants, they might be Googling your restaurant name, but if they're Googling your restaurant name on their phone, it probably implicitly implies that they either want directions or your menu. And so, if you're building your site around, just keyword research, that might not capture the right intent that people are going to have when they're doing searches around mobile.
And to the same extent, you look at this idea where people talk about SEO optimization, like, all right, well, how do I make sure the keywords are on my page? How do I make sure my links are strong, that Google can find it? Specifically with regards to this mobile update, people always talk, it's like, oh, well, responsive this. I need a responsive site. I want to be responsive. Remember that responsive design doesn't necessarily mean mobile friendly. It means that the site will adapt to a different screen resolution or screen size, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving the experience that people want on mobile. Remember we talked about before, where it may be the same person searching on a desktop or a mobile device, but it's not necessarily the same user, and it's definitely not the same user experience. Remember that when we talk about responsive design, to go back to Nate's restaurant example, the fact that the sidebar collapses nicely doesn't necessarily mean that you're having an ideal mobile experience with that page. You want to be able to find opportunities to not have to download external resources like the PDF, that the hours need to be, big and really noticeable on that page, that you have an opportunity to click to call. If you have click to call enabled, especially if you're a local business that generates leads through the phone, you want to have all of these different elements that go beyond simple on-page SEO best practices or site speed, but to really focus in, as we've always talked about, what is Google trying to do with this update? And instead of optimizing for the algorithm or chasing the algorithm, you understand what it is that Google is looking to accomplish. And then those are the principles that should drive the way that you update or make changes to your site for mobile.
Yeah, there's a lot of best practices out there that we'll link to, but I especially think about tap target best practices, which are especially important for any kind of conversion that's going to take place.
And what do you mean by tap targets, Nate?
Yeah, so when you're on your mobile phone and you need to tap a button or tap a link, tap anything to take an action or go to a next page, download something, I especially think about click to call, the buy now button. The average adult's finger pad is 10 millimeters. And so having tap targets like buttons and click to call that are minimum 7 millimeters width and height, that's something that, that those type numbers are something that's information that's out there. That's something that, that Google provides. And it's something that it's specifics that you can use to measure and figure out what is the best user experience on your site. Is this something that you can make a small change that's going to provide a big impact?
And it's a concrete criteria.
Right.
And that's the nice thing about looking at Google's mobile testing tools, looking at just various best practices. There are concrete things that you can do to improve the way that your site is presented on a mobile device to make sure that people can click through to the right navigation. Maybe you can, don't need all of the same pages on your website. Maybe things where, you can start to provide tailored content specific to that mobile audience. Now, these are all things that you can go and make a very kind of tactical plan for optimizing that website, taking advantage of tools and information that are already readily available on the web. So now with all of these kind of immediate tactical action items to take, we don't want this to be something that is overly intimidating, especially for small businesses that have very limited budgets. So if we have to really kind of hammer this home for our listeners here, what this update is designed to do is to improve the mobile experience on Google search. As a website or a business owner, what your goal should be is to make sure that you are providing the ideal experience on a mobile device. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to get at here is we're trying to get you guys to understand that mobile is where search is going. This is something where this is a train that is not going to stop. This train and this trend towards increased mobile activity and mobile engagement is not stopping and frankly is only accelerating. Google pre-announced this update and gave several months. I think they announced it in December, right, Nate?
Oh yeah. It's been around.
So they wanted to give people the opportunity to say, let's get on this train before it completely leaves the station and it becomes prohibitive to try and catch up. So as a website or a business owner, what we want you guys to get out of this episode and understand about this new mobile update is it's designed to improve that mobile experience. If you're focused on providing an optimal experience for your users, whether they're coming in on a mobile device or a desktop device, potentially looking to the future to say, are there any changes in engagement on tablets? Google may be looking to make those changes as well. But really what it boils down to is ensuring that they're understanding that is a different experience on a mobile device than it is on a desktop device. And your website needs to be able to align with that uniquely distinct experience across those multiple devices.
All right. Well, you can find previous episodes, links to all the things that we mentioned, and our contact information at bamboochalupa.com. If you don't want to miss another episode, go subscribe to the podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, please leave us a comment and a rating. We learn a lot from your feedback, and your ratings also help others to discover the show. So for Brett Snyder, I'm Nate Shiver. Thank you for listening.